Well, good morning, everybody. How are you doing? I, personally, am petulant. I was petulant. No longer. I'm petulant no longer. But this whole week, I've been petulant, like a child. I'm not proud of this, but, you know, the show's all about honesty. I let you see the ugly as well as the glorious, and this open is a little ugly. Yeah, when I say petulant like a child, I guess what I'm getting at is, you know how sometimes kids can be so overwhelmed with a situation. You know, some perceived unfairness, you know, some perceived slight. You know, they sense that and they get so overwhelmed that they just collapse in a heap of tears. You know that stage, that ugly toddler stage. That's the stage I've been in all week long. For example, I went out to the truck the other day to just go to work, right? I am minding my own business. I am just going to work. And I get outside and the temperature is still 34 degrees or lower. I don't even know what it was, but it's not higher than that. The truck windshield has frost on it. It's so thick, it's got to be scraped off. And when that happened, that was almost a bridge too far for this little man. If getting up off the ground wasn't so much work at my age, I'd have just collapsed in a heap on the driveway in tears, little freezing tears. Fortunately, I'm too old for that, you know, too old to collapse on the ground. I could break a hip or something like that. And even if I don't break a hip, as I've already said, getting up, it's not easy anymore. So I didn't do that. I didn't collapse. But internally, I was railing at the universe like I was 2 years old. I was so mad, so sick of the cold. Now, I know I choose to live here. I can hear what everybody's thinking. I choose to live in Michigan. I know that. I know that I need to man up. I need to enjoy the cold for what it is, right? Because at some point in the year, we'll be wishing it was cold. Is there ever that point? I don't know. I know I got to handle it better. But I'm sick of it, you know? I know the weather's going to turn, and I guess I got to keep focusing on that. It's going to turn. It's going to get better. The robins are going to stop freezing to death in the trees. You know, spring's going to come. It's going to be a happy day when that happens. You're going to hear me whooping and hollering wherever you live. You just hang your head outside on a warm Saturday morning, and you hear whooping and hollering. That's me celebrating. Anyway, that's been my week. You're listening to the RepcoLite Home Improvement Show, sponsored by Benjamin Moore. And today on the show, let's get to important stuff. Today on the show, I'm going to be sitting down and talking with Keegan Summers from Vivid Creative Contracting. He's one of our painting contractors. He's a regular listener of the show. And we're going to be talking about everything from, you know, how his company got its start, to his go-to paint choice for walls, to his tips and tricks for getting great results when painting cabinets, and tons more. All of that is coming up. Lots of good stuff. But for right now, I want to get to a topic that I kind of started last week. I promised that I'd get to this last week, and I'm delivering on that promise. For regular listeners, you may remember that I talked about all the dust in my home last week. In fact, when you think about it, if you're a regular listener, you have heard so many negative things about my home that you got to wonder how we stay, you know, alive in that place. You know, I've talked about mice and spider infestations and dust and you name it. I mean, nobody's ever going to buy my house. You know, nobody who listens on the radio. They're going to, you know, they'll know that if they do buy it, it's just got to be razed to the ground or burnt to the ground and then you build on the ashes. It's not that bad. I just tend to exaggerate a little bit for drama on the radio. But anyway, I talked about all of that. That's neither here nor there. I'm getting sidetracked. Anyway, my main point last week was to talk about all that dust, you know, and why some homes have so much dust. And then also, of course, dig into ways to minimize it. Now, if you missed that and you are dealing with dust, go check it out. You can find the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, or you can find it online at RepcoLite.com. Just click the On the Radio tab right there on the homepage. Check it out. But one of the potential fixes in dealing with dust, one of the potential fixes is obviously to have somebody come out and clean your air ducts out. And in fact, that was my first thought. You know, when I was assessing the situation, I just need to get the ducts cleaned out. I had a ton of people tell me that's the solution. Just get the ducts cleaned out. But it's not inexpensive. And it does, you know, the expense makes me curious. what the feedback is amongst people who've done it. So I did a lot of research. I asked for input from listeners, and I've gathered a ton of anecdotal evidence that I'm going to compile here. And I know this is anecdotal, so do with that what you want. But I still think it's really helpful. So after doing all of that research, asking for input from listeners, here's what I've got. Most people who've had their ducts cleaned don't experience the game-changing dust elimination that they thought they were going to experience. Now, that's not to say it's not worth doing. For example, plenty of people reported that a lot of visible gunk was pulled out of their ducts. Pet hair, construction debris, decades of buildup. They said they knew all that junk came out of their ducts, and that made them feel better about their home, but they were still a little bummed to find that they still had dust settling on surfaces throughout the home even after the ducts were cleaned. Other people had a slightly different experience. They said that the removal of all that gunk from their ducts did help reduce the dust. But still, a lot of these folks went on to say that it wasn't a game changer. That was the word they used. It's not a game changer. So what does that mean? Well, after digging into it, this is what they were feeling. They had what they called a short-term win from this. One person in particular explained that he had 6 months or so, of less dust accumulating on furniture and floors and stuff. Another person echoed that, said they had that same type of experience, and they also said the house smelled cleaner for, about 6 months or so. But even those folks saw the dust grow again as time went on. So what's the bottom line? Is it worth it? Well, the general consensus is that people who suffer with allergies definitely feel that the air quality in their home improved after duct cleaning. Also, people who just completed a renovation or who've got a number of pets in their home, especially heavy shedding pets, if they've got pets in the home, they also feel that the duct cleaning had a worthwhile effect on the dust situation in their home. So it was positive in that regard. Now, with that said, for the most part, most people who've done it, including those people, don't feel that it's an essential maintenance step for every single home. They feel it's situational. If you know the ducts in your home are in bad shape with lots of buildup, lots of pet hair, whatever, then it can definitely be a part of the process of removing dust from your home. And it probably should be a part of removing, the dust from your home. But don't go in thinking that it's a silver bullet. In most situations, the dust isn't coming solely from this source, from your ducts. And because of that, cleaning just this source isn't going to remove all of the dust that you're dealing with. If you go into it knowing what it's going to do for you, you're not going to be frustrated. You're not going to have your expectations shattered. Best thing I can tell you, I think, is what I told you last week. Buy one of those cheap snake cameras online, the little snake cameras. You can run it right down into the ducts. They're like $30 to $50, somewhere in that range. You can view what the camera's seeing on your phone. Some of them have little monitors. Run it into the ductwork at your home. See what you've got. If it's overloaded with all kinds of goodies, it's probably worth getting a crew out there to at least give you an estimate. But even if you do that, even if you have the ducts clean, remember that dust from skin, fabric, and outdoor infiltration keeps coming back into the home unless you deal with those issues as well. And some of them, dust from skin, not many ways to get around that. It's just going to be a continual thing unless you decide to not live in your home. You could seal it off and keep everybody out. Maybe that would work. Anyway, hopefully that gives you a better understanding of the benefits and the limitations of duct cleaning. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, I'll be in the studio with Keegan Summers from Vivid Creative Contracting. That's all next. Stick around. And we're back. You're listening to the RepcoLite Home Improvement Show, sponsored by Benjamin Moore. And right now, I want to play a portion of a conversation that I had earlier this week with Keegan Summers from Vivid Creative Contracting. And I love these contractor interviews. Not only do we talk about products and painting tips and all of that, but they also help you out there get to know the people behind the work. And when you're hiring a pro, to come out to your house and do some work, that really matters. This particular one right now, what I'm going to play, it's just a small portion of the full conversation. A lot of good stuff. I just didn't have time to get it on air. So you can catch that full interview if you want to on our YouTube series called The Interviews. Just go check that out on RepcoLite's YouTube page. But for right now, here's Keegan Summers from Vivid Creative Contracting. So Vivid Creative Contracting, you run that. It's a family business though, right? It goes back...
Yeah, so I'm fourth generation, sort of.
So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I started my great uncle who previously before he got into residential painting, he worked at a old-timey window factory where all of the windows would get finished with a brush, and he was the guy on the assembly line that would brush all of the window sashes in.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So they're just coming off the line, and he's there brushing them.
Him and quite a few other guys.
Yeah.
It's also back in like the lead paint era. Right.
All right.
But eventually he went residential, and he passed it on to my grandfather. And
where were you guys? Where were they operating?
Mostly out of Newaggle County, up in the Fremont area. I can't tell you exactly where that factory was, I guess, but most of my grandpa's work was up in Newaggle County. Yeah, and we still do a bunch of our work up there too, for what it's worth, because we've sort of got that family name going for us up there. My grandpa passed it down to my dad, and eventually that passed to me about 3 years ago. I think I worked for my dad for about 10 years before that, sort of being groomed lightly for leadership eventually, right? And he kind of passed unexpectedly and passed it on to me. But yeah, there you go. I'm fourth generation. We've been doing it for a long time. Fourth
generation, long time of doing that. So your uncle worked in the window factory. Mm-hmm. He's painting. What did your grandpa previously do?
He was always a painter also.
Always a painter.
Yep.
All right.
Always
so
a painter.
They start working together, start doing residential, and do that for a while. Your dad comes along, you come along. Was there ever a point, in your life when you're thinking, I'm going to go do all kinds of other things?
Oh, so I also spent 2.5 years in college.
Okay.
I couldn't hack it, for lack of a better term.
What were you pursuing? What were you going to be?
Yeah, so I was going to be a chemical engineer.
All right.
And it just wasn't for me. I really like working with my hands, and I didn't feel like I was going to get that there. And then I went into the military for a couple of years in the Air Force. So I was kind of all over the place for a while. Didn't really know what I wanted to do at first. And I guess it's safe to say that this was sort of my fallback at first. But despite that being the case, I absolutely love my job now. And I probably should have never went to college or the military in the first place, because I absolutely love what I do. I should have just went into this from the get-go.
Well, sometimes you gotta reach around. You gotta figure it out.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Maybe you wouldn't have loved it as much if you hadn't done those other things.
That could be very true.
That kind of showed you that this is pretty good yet.
Yeah.
So military, 2 years. What was that like?
Yeah, so I was in the Special Forces program. For the Air Force, trying to become a pararescue jumper, which is basically a Coast Guard swimmer, but for things that are farther offshore. And they have a 93% attrition rate of their Special Forces program. So I didn't make the 93%, or I didn't make the 7%.
But holy smokes!
Yeah, and so if you fail out of the program, they try to reclass you into something else, give you a different job, but they get to pick that job. And so they wanted me to reclass into driving a bus around the base. And I said, no, thank you. I think I will just take my severance package and get out of here and not have to be in for my last 4 years.
How'd you feel about the experience? Was it a good experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't complain at all. I think it was pretty formative for me as a 23-year-old.
Like in what regard? I mean, of course, in so many regards, but...
Yeah, I think I maybe lacked a little bit of discipline prior to that, which maybe is the cliche answer.
Yeah.
Right? But it's
a cliche
for a reason.
It's the truth. Right,
exactly.
right. It's the truth.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I met a lot of great guys, a lot that I'm still in touch with today. So can't complain about that. So
it wasn't a thrown away experience. It was a good experience.
Not at all. No regrets.
So you got college for a couple years, chemical engineer you're pursuing. Then you think, okay, this isn't right. Then you went into the military. Mm-hmm. And then, okay, I'm not going to drive a bus.
Right.
Not going to do it. And then you fall back on this painting career.
Yeah.
And no regrets in that regard. You said that. No regrets. You don't
Absolutely
feel like, oh, man, I could have been, I could have done. But now I'm doing, this feels good to you.
Yeah, not at all.
What about it? I mean, like, okay, so everybody wants to have meaning. We want to find,
you're
what
going
matters
exactly the same place that I was going to go to.
Okay. So, sometimes it's just, the meaning is there's a paycheck and I can do what I want to do. And sometimes, and I think that the most fulfilling careers, of course, are the ones where we feel like I'm doing something. How do you feel about
Right. I don't think it's about a paycheck at all. Of course, I'm like the sole income earner for my family. So it is a little bit about the paycheck.
Of course. I know it's always nice to say, I don't care about that. It's about the people and the work. And of course, it's about the paycheck.
Got to make money too. But I think you're right that jobs are the most enjoyable when you can find some sense of meaning in them. And I think most of that meaning tends to come from when you are doing something for other people. Like I think a lot of doctors and nurses would say they have pretty fulfilling careers because they are directly impacting the health and lives of other people. And so I sort of frame my job as I am making a small positive impact in your life. Now that is lasting though, right? When I come in and I repaint your entire interior, that's something that you get to live with for the next 5, 10, 15 years, depending on how choosy you are about getting new colors every so often. Right? But you enjoy your life more for the sake that I have been there and made that space into your own space, your home, as opposed to what you bought that home as, right?
You know, I work in the paint store. I went to school. I was going to be a teacher. So I went to college for 4 years. I'm going to be a teacher. Then that just wasn't right. You know, I didn't go very far into that. That's not right. So I switched gears and I was going to be a pastor. All right. So I went to a seminary for a year and that didn't seem right. And the money, it was very expensive.
Sure.
So, okay, I'm not sure. I'm going to take a break here for a little bit and try to figure this out for sure before I spend that much money on a career. And ended up, you know, I got married. We had kids really quickly, twins right off the bat. And I ended up working at RepcoLite. And it was such a letdown in a way because I'm working a paint store. You know, I was going to do all these big things.
Right.
And I remember, it's a ridiculous story for me, but I was doing plumbing one weekend at home. I'm not a plumber at all. Struggle. And it was supposed to be something simple, and it's just, I cannot get this thing to stop leaking. I put it back together, it leaks. Take it apart, put it back together, it leaks over and over and over and over and over and over. Sure. Eventually, I'm yelling at the kids, you know, because it's stressing me out. The day is ticking away. I've gone to the store 4 times, to a big box store. Just grabbed the stuff I thought I needed, couldn't make it work. The stress was horrible. I'm fighting with everybody in the house. I finally, last ditch, I got to run and just see once what I'm missing. Go to a hardware store where they actually caught me and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I just need some." "No, tell me what you're doing," because they could tell I was stressed.
Right.
I told him what I'm doing. The guy said, "Do you have this thing?" "What?" "This thing." And he shows me. I don't remember what it was. And I brought it home, put that on. That was the thing, this piece that I was missing to make it work. And I realized that guy works this simple job. You know, he's just working in a hardware store. Right. And yet he made my whole weekend. He saved my weekend. He saved the children from whatever would have been coming if we'd have had no plumbing for the rest of the weekend because of me. And I realized I can do that in the paint store with, you know, helping people find the right tools, the right paint, so all of a sudden there's meaning to that. So I completely get what you're feeling like in a sense, because you go into their homes and it's just whatever they bought. It's somebody else's something. Right. They pick colors.
Yeah, I think it's easy to overlook all of those small impacts that you have on people's lives, but also I think it's pretty important for like your mental health to remember those small impacts that you're making on people's lives whenever possible. It makes you feel good about yourself. It makes you feel worthwhile. It makes you feel like you're doing something important.
Well, and I think that's the beauty of. I mean, really, if you can find that, and it's there, I think in most careers, most jobs. You know, there is that if you can find that, there's a lot of fulfillment that comes from no matter what you're doing, because it's not so much about what I'm doing. It's about who I'm impacting and how I'm impacting them.
I could not agree more.
All right, let's pause the conversation right there and take a quick break. We'll be back in a few minutes with more. Stick around. You're listening to the RepcoLite Home Improvement Show, sponsored by Benjamin Moore, and we're continuing our conversation with Keegan Summers from Vivid Creative Contracting. And if you missed the first part, don't worry, you can catch the full interview on our YouTube series, The Interviews. But for now, let's get back to the conversation with Keegan. So thinking about painters, you know, shifting gears just a little bit, What do people get wrong about painters?
I think that a lot of people underestimate the amount of knowledge that goes into the job. A lot of people feel, I could paint my bedroom this weekend. And you're right, you can paint your bedroom this weekend. it's just going to take you significantly longer than me because I've got a process down that I've honed over many years to be able to do it very quickly. And you also don't know the products that are available to you. And certainly the paint store guys can help with that and direct you in the right direction if you go in there. But even then, a lot of homeowners wouldn't go into the paint store, right? They would go into, they would just pick up the first thing that they saw and not ask for advice, right? And you're liable to make a lot of mistakes that way because you don't know what you don't know. Right.
Right. You don't even know how to ask for what you don't know unless you start with, look, I'm at zero here. Help me with everything. Yeah. But most of the time we don't think about that. When I'm in a place that I'm, auto parts, the plumbing.
Yeah. I was just going to say you should re-reference your plumbing here. It's exactly the same case. Yeah.
You're good at this. You should be doing this. And I didn't even know what to ask for. I had no idea what was so obvious, when it was all over. Now it's really obvious. But at the time, and that's what we see in the paint store a lot of the times. If we, sometimes we'll ask a bad question. We think of it as a bad question. Is there anything else you need? And we try to say that's not the best question to ask. I used to ask that all the time in the store because, of course, no, I think I grabbed everything I needed, but they don't even know what you're missing sometimes.
Yeah, we do a fair amount of work. It's not a huge part of our profit, but we do a fair amount of work that is. Well, we tried to paint this ourselves, and we went over this old oil-based trim with a latex trim paint, and we didn't sand it or apply any sort of primer to help with the bonding adhesion. Now it's all peeling off where we've applied it. Can you come fix it for us? And yeah, we can come fix that for you. But also, if you had just consulted with someone to learn what you didn't know first, you wouldn't have been in this mess.
So many of those situations happen because, a homeowner, we see it a lot where somebody's selling a house. They just want to get a coat of paint on everything.
Yeah, or flippers.
And you just, oh my goodness, because once it's at that point, it's tough to fix. But if it's your own home, if you're even, honestly, you don't even know that question sometimes, but just at least come into the store if you're going to do it on your own, explain what you're doing and what you're dealing with. But I really like that. I think that is something that people don't realize. That's the value. People often will focus on the expense of bringing a painter in. I can save so much money by not. And yet you guys come in and catch all that stuff. And how much money is it worth to not have all of that stuff peeling and not think, how do I fix this? Or to have to bring you in later to try to fix it anyway.
Right. Always worse to bring us in after the mistakes have already been made. Yeah, for sure.
What's the weirdest thing you've ever run into on a job site? Not necessarily along those lines, but just anything. Craziest thing.
Good question. Now, this one's put me on the spot a little bit. The weirdest thing? Okay. I'm not sure this is exactly where you're going with it, but one time, a few years back, on the top of a 40-foot ladder at a very high peak painting an exterior, I suddenly realized that the little gable vent that was up there was full of bats who came swarming out of it at me as I was trying to spray the siding. And let me tell you, it is not that enjoyable to have bats that are battering against
40 feet in the air.
Yeah, maybe the ladder wasn't quite at full extension, but we're certainly over 30, and there's no real, I got to get out of the way quickly here.
What did you do?
I scuttled down the ladder as quick as possible, getting battered in the face by a few bats who were flying out of their gables, and that was maybe the weirdest thing that's ever happened. Yeah, I don't know.
My kid does some exterior painting. He started doing that last year's first year. Had never done any painting. He was the ladder guy. He got good at moving the ladders around. Sure. And he's up there doing it. The heights didn't bother him. And I got a call one day, or I got home one day, and he was telling me, same, not exactly the same thing, but he's way up there, one bat. It was just kind of hanging there. And he painted around him, not around him, he was sleepy. So the bat was fine, didn't do anything. And then he had to go back and do a second coat later. And the bat was still there. And he thought, well, now the bat's ready to go, and just starts, flopping around and clings to his leg. He's got shorts on and the bat's climbing down his leg. He's stuck on the ladder just thinking, what do I do? That is gross stuff.
Yeah, apparently small world. I can't believe you came back with almost the same story.
Yeah, well, that's why.
Maybe it's more common than I think.
I don't know, but man, I don't want it to be. Oh, that's a pretty good weird thing. So you've been doing this a long time. You probably said, how long have you been painting?
13 years.
13 years. You do more than just painting, right?
So I don't have a builder's license. I do have a remodeler's license from the state of Michigan. So we can do basically anything that doesn't change your floor plan. Like we can't I can't pull permits for changing the shape of your foundation.
Okay.
But if you want us to install some cabinets or remove some cabinets or put new baseboard on or window trim or any of the small stuff like that, we are happy to do that for you.
Yeah, so the name works pretty well.
Yeah.
So you've been doing it for a long time. What are some of your, and I guess I'm probably talking about the paint side of things here, your go-to tools, go-to products. You're talking to everybody from contractors to DIYers, so it's always interesting to get, from a professional who uses stuff all the time. Are there roller covers? Are there brushes that you really love? Products that you love?
Sure. I'll give you a quick rundown. We use, for almost all walls, we use microfiber covers. Maybe they take a slight amount of getting used to if you're very used to the other types of roller covers.
In what regard? How's it different?
They hold. The reason I like them so much is because they hold quite a bit more paint in them. But the rolling technique becomes a little bit different because they're very apt to lose a lot of paint right when you first put them onto the wall and make those first couple strokes in a way that some roller covers aren't. It just sort of squeezes out there pretty quickly. And so you need to change up your stroke technique a little bit. But as compared to a woven cover, I think you can get a lot farther per roller fill out of the pan, which maybe saves you 3 seconds for each roller fill, but also 3 seconds thousands and thousands of times per year.
That adds up over time.
Right.
So microfiber covers.
Yep. To give a product, we use Scuffex for all of our walls. Not that I don't think that there are other paints that are pretty comparable, but I've worked out a great deal with the salesman at RepcoLite to get a pretty good price on my Scuffex. And it seems like clients really like I almost want to say the hand feel of Scuffex.
It's crazy. It
feels
different.
Buttery, almost like old school oil paints.
Did you say buttery?
Buttery. It feels kind of buttery.
Yeah, I use buttery. The kids pointed that out the other day. Dad, you used the word butter to describe almost everything that you like. There's the butter zone. That's like the perfect zone. This was buttery. This went on like butter.
Yeah, perfect.
So, but it does. Scuffex has a very different feel.
Yeah.
And everybody who's... Well, like my mom, she paints all the time. She always did, and she probably always will. And she doesn't always, even way before I worked at RepcoLite, she'd just get whatever she could get, and she'd paint it on. And we did Scuffex at her condo, and she would, for that first year, every time people would come over, like we'd have a get-together, you'd see her touching the wall and explaining to somebody. Feel how smooth this feels. This feels weird, doesn't it? Feels different. And then she did another bedroom once, like right after she had everything done. She had to change that color in the bedroom. And she was just crabbing about this the other day, so it's in my mind. And she just grabbed something cheap. She was going to do it herself. So I don't even yell at her anymore because you can't control her. She's going to do it or she's going to do. Oh, she hated it. It didn't feel like Scuffex. It was so ridiculous. So she had to repaint the whole thing with Scuffex.
Oh, yeah.
Really different feel.
Yeah, and it's... in my mind, I'm a little bit surprised sometimes at how much people seem to care about that. But for whatever reason, they do really seem to enjoy that feeling of being able to run your hands on the wall and it feels like the bottom of a no-stick pan or something.
It's very different. But that's where, it's resisting scuffs like crazy. Because you see that. It's just got to play out for the homeowner in a big way.
Yeah, it's great. I love this stuff.
All right, let's take a quick break, and then we'll be back with the conclusion of my interview with Keegan Summers. Stay right there. And we're back. You're listening to the RepcoLite Home Improvement Show, sponsored by Benjamin Moore. And let's jump right back into my interview with Keegan Summers from Vivid Creative Contracting. And if you did miss any part of this, remember, you can catch the full uncut conversation on our YouTube channel under the interviews. So go check that out. Anyway, here's more with Keegan Summers. So cabinet repaints, they're a big part of what you do, or at least part of what you do.
Yeah, I'd say about 40% maybe of our profits come from cabinet stuff.
That's a pretty good thing. And you reached out to me a couple weeks ago and said, hey, you don't talk about cabinets a whole lot on the radio. So I thought that's a pretty good idea. So I talked about cabinets on the radio last weekend.
Okay. So I didn't catch your show last weekend.
Well, you missed out. You missed out. And you've fallen a little bit in my view of who you are as a person.
Fair.
But so I talked about them. Talked about basically just what the process looks like. Laid out a bunch of stuff. You didn't hear it, so that's absolutely fair. You live this job after job. I don't. So I've done them, and I know what they're like, but I don't do them 40% of my job.
Sure.
So what kind of things, whether you cover something that I covered before or not, when you're thinking about like a DIY or tackling cabinets, what would be just a handful of tips that you'd give out that maybe would help them avoid some mistakes and kind of lead to a great finish?
Okay, great. DIYer, you are probably underestimating the amount of prep that you need to do those cabinets before you start applying even the primer to those cabinets. Our process, once we get them back to the shop, take all the doors off, whatever, once we get them back, is to clean them with a water solution, like typically Simple Green maybe, or a crud cutter mixed with water, because that helps remove all the foodstuffs that might be on there that are water soluble. But a lot of stuff is not water soluble. You also need to, after we wash them with water, we wash them with denatured alcohol, which both helps the water get out of any pores in the wood, helps it evaporate up out of there that might be left there from before, but also dissolves a lot of stuff that the water isn't going to touch, specifically like the hand grease around the knobs where they start to eventually, after a long time, get gummy from where you touched them. And then we do a third cleaning. For specifically those gummy areas, we go back with lacquer thinner. It's also pretty nasty, so if you're going to use it in a confined space, please put a mask on.
It's got to be ventilated well.
Or do it outside.
Yeah.
Would be even better.
So how long are you cleaning, like for a typical job?
I would say that for like a single kitchen of, let's say it's got 30 cabinet doors in it, or doors and drawers fronts, probably we're on like 6 hours for two of us just cleaning and sanding those cabinets before we ever get ready for paint. So I guess
majority of
12 hours
fell over.
Total, yeah.
Their family members are fanning them, trying to wake them up.
Yeah, it's not
trying to get them to forget that part happened and that might be part of their project.
Yeah,
but people don't buy into how much the prep takes, and if you don't do the prep, there's so many problems that can play out down the road.
Yeah, not to toot my own horn here on how great of a cabinet painter I am, but doing prep that well and using the highest of quality products, they should come out of our shop as basically brand new cabinets. And we charge a lot of money for that, no doubt. That 32 or 30 plus odd cabinets in your kitchen is probably running you in the $4,000 to $6,000 range, which is kind of a little bit of sticker shock, I think, for some people.
But how much is new cabinets?
But new cabinets, right, you're looking at $30,000 or more. Plus, you have to live with the inconvenience of having all your cabinets ripped out and your kitchen be non-functional while the new ones are getting installed. You could still use your cabinets while take your doors off site and spray them. So we tend to brush and roll the stiles and rails, which again, if you don't know at home, are like the little dividers and the bottom piece of your cabinet that runs right underneath the countertop and the bottom and frames out the front of the box where the doors bump. The ends of the boxes, though, if they're exposed or you've got it at the end of your big pantry that just sticks out facing the living room, we mask those off and spray those with the little HVLP unit that we bring in there to prevent overspray.
All right. So let's shift gears out of painting for a little bit. When you're not painting, you're not on the job site doing stuff, what's life look like for you? What are the things that matter, the things that you love to do?
Mostly I spend time with my kids.
So you got how many kids?
I've got two. One is a 2-year-old and one is a 10-year-old.
All right.
It's a pretty big age gap.
Girls?
Older one is the girl and the younger one's a boy. It could not be, not just in age, but could not be more different in personality. My girl is an absolute girly girl, loves lipstick and makeup, and has never played a sport in her life that she didn't absolutely loathe you for.
For trying to introduce her to.
Whereas my son, who he's only 2.5, but if he could spend all of his time running around outside and eating bugs and kicking a ball, that's exactly what he would do. Oh, yeah. So they don't interact with each other much.
They will. They'll fight. They'll fight
sure.
That'll come.
Just most of my time after work is spent relieving my wife a little bit of, she was home all day.
So what do you do? So you got kids that have completely different interests. Yeah. How do you keep them both entertained at the same time?
Oh, well, you let me know when you figure it out.
Okay.
That's... my daughter likes games. My 2-year-old is a little bit too young to understand games, but I do this nice multitask shuffle where I can be playing a game of Uno with my daughter and also tackling or wrestling my son with my feet, or like kick the ball for him to go chase across the yard.
All right. Yeah. That's working out.
You got to find a few tricks in there that do some multitasking.
So let's shift gears here a little bit. I want to talk about the trades. You know, I love talking about the trades because my kid's an electrician, one of my kids. Nice. I've got another one who's a teacher. He went the trade route. She went the professional route. So I don't have a horse in either of these races. But, you know, you were going to college to be a chemical engineer, pursued the military. Now you're in the trades. You love that. I mean, talk to the people out there who are maybe on the fence. You know, college is expensive, and yet there's still a pretty strong push out there that if you don't go to college, you're missing out. I mean, what do you feel about that?
I think that is wrong. You know the phrase, you can't put the cat back in the bag, right? A lot of kids, especially if you are coming from a lower income family, have to take on student loan debt to go to college in the first place. And I think that there's a pretty big push from those families for those kids to go to college, specifically because they want that kid to break free of the cycle of their lower income lifestyle, right? Be the first one in our family to go to college and get a good job. And also, there's no cost to trying trade before you go to college, right? I'm not going into $20,000 of student loan debt to go apprentice as an electrician for a little while, say. You're not going to make great money as an electrician's apprentice, right, when you first start out, although electricians get paid really well once you got your journeyman's license.
They get paid pretty well.
But, you know, there was no harm to, when you're 19, going to see if you enjoy a trade, whatever one maybe seems like it floats your boat, before you make that big decision to go spend 4 years of your life in school. Better to test it out and decide you don't like it than to, wind up like me, where you went to college for 2.5 years and now I've got, exactly like I said, $27,000 in student loan debt that I'm slowly paying back for half of a degree that I'm not using. Right, the cat got out of the bag on that one.
No, and like you talked about at the beginning, you know, you love what you do, not for the money, not just for the money, not just for whatever, not just that I love holding a brush and putting paint on it. Yeah, just makes my world. It's because you're interacting with people. You've connected with that deeper part of what makes a career truly valuable.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to throw out there?
I'll just say thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for being here.
I really enjoyed this. This went nice and smooth and cool, and I shouldn't have felt nervous when I walked into the studio.
Were you nervous when you walked in?
A little bit. I'm
intimidating.
Yeah, you definitely. You just tower over me with that big build.
Short joke. That's all right.
It was good. I liked it. I had fun.
All right. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, you betcha.
And that's going to do it for this week's episode. But before we wrap up, if you would like to get a free estimate from Keegan Summers at Vivid Creative Contracting, just give him a call at 231-578-7869. That's 231-578-7869. They do interior painting, exterior work, and remodeling. So if you've got a project coming up, reach out. And don't forget, Benjamin Moore Aura, Regal Select, and Ben Interior Paints are all 20% off at every RepcoLite location through April 29. All right, that's it. Whatever you do today, make sure paint's a part of it. And from all of us at RepcoLite, we want to wish all of you a very happy Easter. I'm Dan Hansen. Thanks for listening.